fans, and welcome to a very special edition of the Terry Collins Show. This week, we got a real good one for you. So, without further ado, direct from Port St. Lucie, Florida, let's bring on the former Mets manager and an analyst on SNY's Baseball Night in New York, and does other appearances there as well. Let's bring on Terry Collins. Terry, how you doing?
Good, John. Good. I'm looking forward to this week. You and I, when we talk about, future shows and something, this is one I was looking forward to. So I can't wait to get it going.
Well, this is kind of the first time, I think, ever that two former managers in the New York Mets that were so beloved with the fans are going to get together face to face to talk about baseball, to talk about the Mets, to talk about everything that's going on in the game. So tell us about your relationship with Buck Showalter, who will be our special guest.
Well, I've known Buck a long time. It actually started after the 94 season. I was managing in Houston and Buck was the manager of the Yankees. And, we had the strike and we were going to have an exhibition game in Houston with the replacement players. And so we get to Houston and Buck and I are sitting in the dugout and we are, we don't know what to do with what's going on. The replacement players, didn't know what to expect. And we kind of sat there and talked our woes about things were going to happen. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of it, they came out and said, "Oh, the strike's over. You're going to go back to spring training." So that's when it started. And then I didn't, of course, back then we didn't have interleague play, so we didn't play the Yankees. But when Buck left and went to the Diamondbacks, I kind of watched him, and I had gone to the American League. So I got to see him in spring training some because we trained there, we trained out in Arizona together. But when I resigned in Anaheim, the first guy to call me was Buck Showalter. And he was absolutely the best. He told, he said, "What are you doing? I mean, and he talked about passion and he talked about what's wrong with having a passion, what's wrong with caring." And he was so good. And that's what started our friendship. And we have stayed in touch ever since then.
Well, we certainly look forward to this Talking with TC. It's going to be a great one. I think everyone's going to love it. So let's go now to this special Talking with TC with Buck Showalter. Now it's time for Talking with TC. And on today's segment, we have the pleasure of bringing on one of Terry's peers in that exclusive group, former Major League managers who managed with the New York Mets with 1,727 wins as a big league skipper. He's a three-time American League Manager of the Year and also won the National League Manager of the Year in 2022 with the Mets, making him the only man in Major League history to win that award with four different teams, 4 different decades. He's managed both New York franchises, the Mets, the Yankees, the Arizona Diamondbacks, and the Texas Rangers. In his 2 years with the Mets, he became a favorite of not only the players, but also the New York fans. We'd like to welcome to Talking with TC, Buck Showalter. Buck, pleasure to have you here.
What's up, man? What's up, Terry?
Hi, Buck.
We have no time today, do we? We're so busy.
Yeah, we got all sorts of time. I just want to thank you for coming on the show, Buck. I've known you for a long, long time, and obviously think the world of you and the job you've done, no matter where you've been, tremendous. And I thought when John and I were talking before we started this podcast, get it going, I said, one of the guys I want to get on is Buck Showalter because he's the guy who's lived the two different types of manager lives in the last 20 years. He was there when, the old school way, and now he's had to deal with the new school way and has been successful in both of them. And I want to hear, how you adapted, how you changed your way. What did you change your way from, 10 years ago to where today, there's so much intervention from people on the outside.
Yeah. Terry, what's the old expression, adapt or die? Yeah. And the best situations I've been in are the ones that we're just open to different ideas. Whether you look at, for instance, the Rangers with Chris Young, who went to an Ivy League school but played the game, and Bruce Bochy, and there's such a respect for what each one brings. I see it. I live here in Dallas, and I see it every day. You can tell that Chris knows that Bruce brings some things that he can't bring, and Bruce knows that Chris and his front office bring some things that they don't bring or don't have the time to bring, and there's a respect for what everybody does. And When you have those meetings and everybody in there feels comfortable to deliver what they deliver, that's part of your job. And I think adapting to that, um, and everybody's got something to offer. It's up to you to create an environment where they feel like they can do it. But it can be challenging sometimes. Instead of automatically going, "Wait a minute, I've never heard that before. That's new to me," and pushing it away. The reason you and I probably managed along did because we said, "Let me hear that. Will that help us win? Bring it in here." But we are going to, push back a little bit if it isn't copacetic with our years in the dugout in the seventh and eighth and ninth inning when there's a tough call to be made, because that can be a lonely place, as you know better than anybody.
Yeah, Buck, that was. I mean, we all know that you got to, if you want to manage that, you got to adapt to some things. But for years and years, I mean, I wasn't. I was in my end of my managing career was when analytics kind of got started, where a lot of guys, a lot of different teams were using them. I really didn't get many of them, but when I looked at them, they were no different than what our guts told us watching our team play nightly. We knew
Yeah,
what kind of guys, we knew what hitters were going to be a tough challenge for some pitchers, and vice versa, which pitchers that we're going to face were a bad match for some of our hitters. So I was always confused. Like somebody needed to come in and tell me that. That's and I don't know if that's.
I always felt good when my gut was verified by a number. Like you'd see, wow, Mattingly handles left-handed pitching really well, aesthetically. And then you pull up the numbers against guys. Randy, that Donnie hit close to 300 off Randy Johnson. It was unbelievable, but you see a guy take pitches and swing, and you go, your eyes tell you something. But when I could get it verified with the numbers, then I really felt good about it in the dugout. But the tough one was when the numbers didn't back up what your eyes were saying, or your eyes didn't back up what the numbers were saying, and that's when the human element came into play.
Yeah, I go Buck. I go back one time when Jim Leland told me once that he was getting ready for a game, and one of his people from the analytics team came in and said that Miguel Cabrera wasn't a very good hitter in the eighth and ninth inning when the game was on the line, and Jim said, "You want me to take him out?" I said, "Well, you have to make that decision." And Jim said, "Could it be the fact that he's maybe the best hitter in the league and they aren't going to give him anything to hit?" So,
it's funny. Barry Bonds told me one time, I don't know, later on, after I walked him with the bases loaded, he all of a sudden, I was his best buddy. He would come over during BP. "Hey, Buck, how you doing?" Whatever. And as you well know, Barry didn't talk to a lot of people. He says, "The last time I hit off a right-hand pitcher other than a closer after the seventh inning? It was like 2.5 months, 3 months." To your point with Jimmy and Cabrera, because those guys, they're not going to get beat with a back front end of a bullpen or something. It's just not going to happen unless you're getting blown out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I totally agree. But that's why I think sometimes I hear about they come in and they give you numbers. I was watching the game last night, and I'm sitting here saying, here both teams have analytic teams, and both teams basically have the same numbers. So if you're a pitcher, if you're Max Fried, what the numbers are telling the Mets hitters. So now, do you change your style, or do you continue what you've always done and make quality pitches? And and I think, well, geez, here's the Mets saying, well, we're going to get these kind of pitches in these certain situations because here's what the data tells us, and then they get almost no hit. I mean, sometimes it baffles you. So,
Terry, it's like I tell people, everybody's looking at the same numbers. Okay, it just depends on what you choose to weight. Maybe you weight on base percentage. Maybe you weight zone ratings defensively. Maybe you weight. It just depends on what your analytical department chooses to weight. But we're all using the same stuff. So a guy told me one time that he thought it was easier to manage now because you know what they're looking at. You know what they're basing their decisions on. Whereas before, you had to scout the manager a little bit. And, we had this thing called advanced scouts who used to go actually sit with the team and tell you what Bruce Bochy or Terry Collins have been doing lately. Hey, he squeezed in the fourth inning with D. Sarcina, And you knew all these things going in, and you had to weigh it. But Now it's just kind of, well, let me look at the same things that he's looking. Here's what he sees with our team. I used to ask our guys, if you were another manager or advanced scout for them, how would he look at our team? And you try not to get too predictable because I don't even know if they have advanced scouts anymore. Much physical guys there.
Yeah, Buck, I don't think they do. I mean, I did advance one year for Don Baylor in the Cubs, and I had never scouted in my life, so this is my first time doing it. And I had advanced scouts in Houston, I had advanced scouts in Anaheim, but I'm out there advancing for the first time. And when the season was over, Eddie Lynch was the GM of the Cubs, and I love Ed today. When the season was over, I called him. I said, I'm not going to do this job anymore, but the next guy you hire, his first job should be follow the Cubs, scout the Cubs, so that he has data on how to get them out. And so, now you can go watch somebody else. I go back. I scouted a game one night. Remember Sterling Hitchcock, the left-handed pitcher?
Yeah, we traded him.
You traded him? So
Yeah,
we
traded for Tino Martinez, a guy named Tino.
Oh, that's a pretty good trade then. Yeah, it's a good pickup. But I went out and I scouted a game. He was going to pitch against the Cubs. So I went and watched him pitch. And my report at the end of the night was, hey, he's got a good changeup. Didn't use it very much. In this particular, the game I saw, he threw 83 changeups against the Cubs. 83. So the hitting coach calls me the next day and he says, we can't hit a changeup. And I said, well, I don't know that. I haven't seen the Cubs play. So, I mean, and that's where I'm just wondering, where the analytical side said, geez, you don't have, they don't hit a changeup very good, but my pitcher tonight doesn't have a very good changeup.
So you sit in those meetings and they have these things like, I mean, years ago, I remember when I was managing the Oneonta New York Penn League in 85. And I used to bring the charts home from the game. I'd give them to my wife would have 6 different colored pencils, and she would do each starter, where they hit the ball, humpback, straight line, fly ball, line drive. And to this day, she can tell you that rotation. And she would write in there where they hit the ball. This was a team you played maybe 8 times a year. And there were 16 teams in the league. And we played people where we thought they were going to hit the ball back in 1985 by charts we kept. Now it's great. You've got all this stuff feeding through computers and multiple at-bats from other clubs and everybody. There's no reason not to know where they're probably going to hit the ball. But when the pitcher pitches away from the defense, that's another story altogether. But, you sit in some of these meetings and you want to go, boy, do you think we haven't done this before? But there's tried and tested methods and methodology, so to speak, where sometimes you'd like to go, listen, we tried what you guys are getting ready to try, and it probably not going to work. And here's why it probably won't work over the long haul, because you've done it. When I see managers being hired and whatever, Terry, what I love to look at is their path. Their path. Like I love the manager with the Mets' path. I think he's got a great path. Minor leagues, winter ball, instructional league, all the things where you learn situation, you learn to deal with people, and you learn to try to get to the end game. I mean, you think about your path. You got through playing your first manager. What was your path, Terry?
Well, I mean, I played in the minor leagues, and I played through college, played in the minor leagues. I was a player coach for 3 years in AAA with Del Crandall. Yeah, and gone. And then I finally got my first managing job in Lodi in the Cal League. And, and by the way, Buck, I don't know if you did, but I was by myself. I didn't have any coaches. I didn't have a pitching coach. And
do you have a trainer?
I had a trainer. I did have a trainer. But, my first 2 years in baseball in the minor leagues, we didn't have a trainer. I was with the Pirates, and one of the players carried the first aid kit. That was part of he got $20 a month to carry the first aid kit from, on the field every day. So, but, and again, it was all about, so as you're getting ready to manage, I mean, you just studied stuff. You studied other managers. You studied, I used to call Del all the time about different things, and to try to learn the game and learn different and to teach it. I mean, as a manager by yourself, I had to teach catching. I didn't catch. I had to teach outfield play, base running. You had to teach pitching, and then I was very lucky that year. That was the year when Fernando Valenzuela burst on the scene, and they hired Jim Brewer, who had the screwball like Fernando did. Hired Jim Brewer, and he came to Lodi because he was going to teach the screwball to different pitchers because that was now the new thing. And he saw my pitching staff for a week, and he said, "I'm not teaching the screwball to anybody. I'm going to teach them to throw a strike with their fastball."
Yeah, the pitching coordinator, so to speak, with the Angels, good friend of mine, a good coach, Dom Cheedy. He sent me a picture of a sign that says, "I don't care how hard you throw ball 4." Isn't that great? That's just that
Yeah.
one statement. In the bullpen, they had a sign up that said, "I could care less how you throw ball 4, how hard you throw ball 4."
Right.
That's what
Yeah.
I think that's what's missing. Some is when these guys get tired, they can't go to their command to get them through that 6th and 7th inning. Terry, I watch what's going on with the injuries and stuff, and I just shake my head. It's not as simple as one thing. Everybody wants to say, "Well, it's this. It's travel ball." Oh my gosh, it's guys that throwing too hard at 16 years. It's not just one thing. We didn't get here with one thing. I think a lot of things are coming to fruition. It's kind of like I was looking the other day. Do you see the catcher interferences? What the rate is right now?
I
Each
saw
year,
it.
for 10 years, the rate has gone up every year except the COVID year in 20. More and more catcher interferences are going up. We're on a pace to like shatter the catcher interferences. I think they're going to end up with maybe 124. And when people are getting hurt with the catcher interference, it's all, I don't understand how if a catcher's in the catcher's box and a hitter's in the batter's box, why should anybody be penalized for that? Okay, maybe the person to be penalized is who's trying to get those catchers so far up. I'm waiting for an owner, Terry, to come down and go, "Hey, this guy we just put on the DL for 6 or 7 weeks. I'd like to speak to the guy who taught him or said it would be a good idea to stick his arm out and get up underneath the hitter because we're going to have to pay this guy $1 million on the IL while he heals." So, it's coming out. I'm waiting for that owner to go, "Who's teaching this that's getting these guys hurt and also giving them first base?" I still haven't quite figured that out, why they're getting penalized when both of them are legally in some place. Anyway.
Buck, I totally agree. And I'm going to tell you what, a few years ago, I would just like to hear what Joe West would say to a catcher who's trying to steal a strike with Joe West behind the plate.
Well, he would say, "Son, just give me a good look. Anything else, we're going to have a problem. Give me a good look."
That's exactly right. Yeah.
The good umpires I've talked to, Terry, this is what they miss a lot because a lot of people talking about this have never been in a catcher's box or they've never been in an umpire. They will tell you that they make up their mind about 3 or 4 inches in front of home plate before you even catch the ball. They're not going to go boom, look for 3 seconds, see how you caught it, think about it. Watch them. They go strike. So your brain has to make up your mind as that ball's almost entering the zone. So actually, it's about presentation. It's about not blocking them. Joe was right. I hate to admit that. Joe was right. He goes, "Just give me a good look at the pitch. I'll take it from there." And as much as Joe could irritate you, Joe, when he wanted to be, was as good a ball strike umpire as there was.
Oh, without a question. Bruce Fleming.
You wanted him in a big game. They used to get on Ken Kaiser. Let me tell you something. When Kaiser was locked in a full house in Yankee Stadium, there was none better than him ball strike.
Yeah. But that's why the umpires pretty soon are going to start saying, "Hey, look, you just catch it. I'll call the balls and strikes," and get them back. And remember years ago when Javi Lopez in Atlanta used to get outside that catcher's box, and Maddox and Glavine just nailed the ball 5 inches off the plate, got strike after. They finally had to get him back in the catcher's box. I think the same thing's going to happen with this framing thing. This framing numbers now have become so important for catchers. There's going to be the umpires are pretty good to say, "Hey, look, you just get back here and catch the ball in the air or block it, and I'll take care of the rest."
Yeah. Two things there is that why is he second in baseball in framing, and the next year he's 27th? Did he change? Maybe it was the pitchers he was catching.
Yeah.
That has something to do with it. Did he change completely? I used to talk to a catcher. I said, "Wow, you were second in the league last year, and now you're 27th, 28th. What happened to you?" And I tell you another thing for fans. This box you see on TV, that's not completely accurate. I think people need to realize that just because it touches this, it's not necessarily a strike. And you want to get the major league offices going. Talk about something that with that box, because they will tell you it's not completely accurate. And a lot of these announcers sit there and just hammer these umpires, and just by the box, and that's really not fair to him, to be honest with
I
you.
agree. I totally agree. That's, I had a pitcher one time came in and, especially, and I was blessed. I happened to have some guys who could really throw hard. And I had a pitcher come in my office one day and said, listen, I'm not going to get on the catcher, but I want him to catch the ball. I don't care how much he wants to try to frame it but balls are bouncing off this guy's glove. And he said, I need somebody to catch the ball.
Yeah.
And I totally support that. I said that's right. You're out there and you're thinking, God, if I have too much sink on my ball, it's going to go right. It's going to bounce off this guy's glove again. And, that's a bad feeling for a pitcher.
I can remember you're talking about that group in Atlanta. Glavine threw the first inning against us in Arizona and came off the field and put his glove over his face because he knew the strikes he was getting that first inning, the game was over. The game was over. I did the same thing with Jimmy Key. John Hirschbeck had a very liberal strike zone, and it was a day game getaway on Sunday. And Jimmy had a choice. He had a little bad back or something, and he could either pitch Saturday or Sunday. And I decided to pitch him Sunday with John Hirschbeck because Jimmy could, he could dot a gnat's ass, okay? And he kind of fought me a little bit. I said, Jimmy, I just think Sunday's a better day for you, da-da-da-da. And so the first inning's over on Sunday, and he looks over at me and goes, I got it now. I know why I'm pitching on Sunday. Because John Hirschbeck, you give Jimmy that much off the plate, it was over. It was over.
Yeah.
He just looked, he said, thanks, Skip. Later he goes, thanks. He said,
Buck, I'm managing in Houston, and we're playing the Cardinals, first game of the series, and Doug Drabeck is going to pitch like on Monday. And this is a weekend series. The umpiring crew comes out to start the first game of the series, and Frank Pulley is at second base, would mean he's got the plate on Sunday. Doug Drabeck walked up to me and he said, I'll give you $1,000 to pitch me Sunday. He said, it's going to be a fast game. And, Doug had that great command of everything. And he said, we'll be out of here in a hurry on Sunday.
Yeah, Johnny, you talk about managers. I try not to say this guy was the best, this guy was the worst. Yeah, but Johnny Oates was about as good as I ever played for. I played for some good ones, Stump Merrill. But Johnny, he got things like that. I learned so much from watching. What's funny, Terry, about managing, though? I learned as much from bad managers, guys that I played for or worked with or saw. You learn from them like, boy, don't handle it that way. That there's a better way to do it. You think back through your career, I bet you can come across some situations where you were loyal and you kept your mouth shut, but you watch the situation get handled and you go, wow, that's probably not the best way to do it. And you learn from it.
I agree. Yeah. Buck, when, 2 years ago, when you guys were going through that tremendous run, 100 and some wins, I mean, I thought your bullpen and, the way you use Diaz, I mean, just changed. For me, it's changed the way closers are being used now throughout baseball. I mean, how many times, Buck, in the 8th inning, when that middle of that lineup's come up in the 8th inning, and I'm sure your thought is, hey, look, I'm going to win or lose this game this inning. And you bring Diaz in the game. And you know what? You never heard him complain. He wasn't going to get a save, but you never heard him complain about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you have to sell to your players is to buy in what's best for the team. That's the challenge. I understand individual things and what they're going to do, but to buy in, that was in a contract year too, Terry. That's what.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But, when you're sitting there facing Acuna and Olsen and Riley in the 8th inning, not that the bottom of their order is anything to sneeze at. I mean, it doesn't take Casey Stengel to figure out where the real challenge was going to be. But you have to have the things you've done the previous 3 days to pitch that 9th inning with somebody else. With a lot of the injuries and things that are going on, I'm kind of the opposite. I hate these people that talk about problems but don't have no solutions. I'd kind of like to see them go to 11 pitchers instead of 13. And then you'd really know what GM and managers and pitching coaches can handle pitching. I think you'd see a decrease in injuries if you drop, because people come in now and it's full throttle. I think if you go back to 11 and 12-man pitching staffs, you'd see a different management of pitchers. I watched the dry humps in the bullpen. That's where there's like 2 or 3 things I'd come in if I was going to watch one day a manager. I'd watch the bullpen. The dry humps kill these guys. And ups, down, up, down, up, down. And I just think if you had less pitchers and you were forced to manage, remember this thing called a long reliever and how valuable they were?
Yeah. Yeah, they were huge.
But
especially when pitchers had to hit years ago, those long relievers saved you. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
they really did. And I used to love those guys. You'd be down 4-1, and you bring a long reliever in, and 3 innings later, it's still 4-1.
Yeah.
They never let the game get out of control, and those guys were so valuable, so valuable. So, John, you got any questions for Buck? You want to run by him?
Oh,
Uh-oh.
absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. Buck, as the only manager in the MLB to win Manager of the Year for different teams for different decades, you've seen so much of the game transforming over this time. You have pitch com now, you have a pitch clock that's been instituted. Did these changes in the game over the years change your managerial style in any way? And overall, what has the role of a manager and how has the role of a manager changed today?
Well, with the PitchCom, we've had to dictate time because we never had that issue for a number of years. We didn't have walk-up music. We didn't have all the timeouts, and the pace of game never was an issue. So we've had to legislate it. And somebody said the other day sometimes the game gets a little monotonous, so they just made the monotony faster. But that's kind of always been the case with something. But it was done quickly. The game is the more it changes, the more it stays the same. You still got to do the things that you got to catch the baseball. Bad defenders get exposed in the big leagues. What's that old expression? That little white rat will always find you. You put a bad defender on the field, as Terry knows, that ball will find you. And I just the stolen base. I'm not sure. It used to be. It's kind of like when a guy hits a home run off a backup catcher when you run out of pitching, and somebody hits a home run. Everybody goes, it was off a catcher. It's no big deal. It's kind of like the stolen base now. The rules are so much in the runner's favor now that stolen bases to me just it's pretty hard not to steal a base. And everybody wants to get on the catchers and the pitchers. A lot of these guys are stealing on the clock. If you'll watch them, they know when you've thrown over and it comes 3-2-1, it's the break they're getting at first base. These guys can't. The biggest weapon they took away from them was holding the ball and making them come to a complete stop. That was the only way with Ricky Henderson because he would just keep moving. If you let him have movement, nobody was going to throw him out. So I feel for the catchers in today's game because everybody's looking at these throwout percentages, but we've tilted it so much. Take those clocks up there and put them behind the runners and watch what happens where they can't see the. But then the first base coach would start talking to them in their ear though. So the rule changes, as Terry knows, you adapt to everything. You just want them to tell you up front. But when they change the rules in the middle, like the blocking the plate, it seems to change every couple of weeks. How'd you like to be a catcher now, Terry, with all the different
Oh,
stuff? I mean, we've taken a couple of plays, one at second base and one at the plate, and we've basically changed the whole dynamic of the game where sliding in the home plate head first is okay now. I mean, there were reasons why guys didn't get hurt that much at home plate for years because nobody slid head first into a shin guard. That was a no to go. And you learned how to slide. The sliders today, feet first, because of so much travel baseball, a slide is basically a controlled fall. And in other sports, when I see a bio of a player where he only played one sport, baseball only, it's a red flag for me. The bad sliders I've had in the big leagues are usually travel guys. Because in football, you learn how to fall. Basketball, you learn how to fall. Hockey, you learn how to fall. You name a sport other than golf that you don't learn how to fall. And the sliders today, because they're all going head first because they're not worried about injury. But now you adapt to everything, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. You still have to do the same things to be successful. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I had a question about you've led many coaching staffs, obviously, across your career as manager. What goes into that selection process, finding the right guy to be on your team, on the coaching staff? And some of which, like a guy like Wayne Kirby, followed you to coach a few of your teams. So, what is that process like when you are building a staff?
Yeah, I talked to Curb yesterday. He's got a kid, a junior in high school at some kind of player, Caden. He's enjoying his time there. What you do is you go in and you want to say, what do you need to bring? What do the players need? Every situation is a little different. You don't ask them necessarily to adjust to you. You adjust to the need. One thing I always ask at every situation is, who are we? Baltimore, we knew we couldn't be the Yankees. We couldn't be the Red Sox. We didn't have the payroll that them in Toronto. So What were we willing to do? What could we do to separate ourselves? We could out 6-year free agent. We could out minor league without relationship. What could we do? So the same thing with coaching staffs. I've been very fortunate to have some great coaches. And then, as Terry knows, sometimes you have to protect them from people who really don't know. And you can have a great pitching coach with a bad pitching staff, and he may make them a little bit better. It's just so far he can take them. But, I've always had a good group of coaches that you have to support them, though. I think Terry would know this. I think every manager in the big league should have to spend a year coaching third base to have not apathy, but sympathy for coaching third base in the big leagues. I was fortunate to coach third base for the Yankees, and Terry's done it in the minor leagues, done it with the Dodgers and whatever. Until you've been in that box, especially in New York, and realize the pressure involved there, I always made sure that after a close decision, out or safe, I would always pat the third base coach on the butt in front of the players. Support those guys. You want them to feel comfortable to do what you want done, then you better support them. And I'll guarantee you, Terry can give you stories of saving somebody on his coaching staff's job and ownership. Mike Flanagan years ago told me, you want to help yourself in Baltimore, something I didn't do? Go sit down with Peter Angelos once a homestand. It's the only way you're going to be able to keep your coaching staff intact. And he was right. Mike, God rest his soul, gave me some great advice that I'd go over there once a homestand and let him vent about a pitching coach or a hitting coach. But that continuity that you had to have, you had to be supportive. Terry, what do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, and I've always said, Buck, managing's a tough job. And I've always wanted to have a guy, I always did have a guy on my staff who could walk in, look me in the eye and tell me I screwed up and not take offense to it. Hey, look, and I love those guys. They came, hey, you're wrong here. You're wrong on this one. And you know what? And again, all we're trying to do is get the team better, and everybody's got to be on the same page. And therefore, when criticism time comes, like you say, you got to support the coach. And there's times, hey, look, when somebody makes a bad decision or something goes on, and you got to just bite the bullet and realize mistakes are made. And even as a manager, that's why I always liked that guy that I could trust, that he had my back.
Kerry, it's funny about that.
Decisions.
It's funny. I call them pushback guys. If some of the fans today sat in our meetings in spring training, whatever, they would think that we hated each other. I'm talking about the coaching staff. If you had thin skin because you cared and so passionately, you wanted their real opinion. Oh, you want to know? You really want to know what I think? And I used to love surrounding myself with pushback guys that didn't kiss my rear. They would go, Buck, all due respect, here's what I think. I don't see it that way, and here's why. And you want to create an atmosphere where they felt comfortable to say that and bring it, but they better be able to back it up. But we'd have these meetings and the winter meetings, whatever, it was scouts, and my God, you'd think that they were going to kill each other. And then they'd walk out the door, go have a beer together, but they were passionate about it. And they felt comfortable with giving their opinion. You remember those scouts used to come in and sell a player they wanted drafted. You think they wanted, it was Mickey Mantle. Then he'd go, wait a minute, no, not the 30th round. I can get this guy anytime, but I really like him. My God, I thought you were trying to sell me on a first-round pick here. Remember, they'd be crying, telling you about a player. I'm going, oh, my God, I got to draft this guy.
Oh, I sat in one time. I sat in several times when all the years I managed. I went draft day. If we were home, I would go in, sit in the draft room, and it was worth. You could have paid price of admission. They could have charged, and it was so fun. And you're right, man. Somebody'd be out there, and these guys would be screwed. Got to get the, and they'd pass on him, or somebody take him the draft or the pick before. And oh my God, you thought their whole life was coming to an end. But yeah, that passion's what I wanted in coaches. I wanted guys, one of the things, Buck, and I don't know how much you've been around Pat Ressler and Kevin Long, but,
good baseball people.
Good baseball. And you know what made him even better? They're workaholics.
Yeah.
When you walked in that ballpark, they're in a batting cage. There was never been a hitter that I had in New York when they were the coaches, whoever went in that batting cage, pregame or postgame, that those coaches weren't in there and trying to help and be willing. You and I talked about all the batting practice you and I threw, and I mean hours of it. And at 9 o'clock in the morning and 4 in the afternoon to the on the same day. And those guys did that day in and day out. And I'll tell you what, you can get the players right on your side.
Terry, we used to go to instructional league, and we would have early BP at 8:30. We'd have regular BP at 10:30. We'd have extra BP after the game about 5 o'clock, and you'd throw all 3 times. You never said anything about it. You just did it. Back then, instructional league would run until Thanksgiving for almost 2 months, and we used to keep standings. I remember Steinbrenner expected us to win the instructional league because it meant that we had the best prospects in the instructional league. The way he viewed it. I mean, when we left spring training, our managers, 6 or 7 of us, we would go to spring training, would follow behind Billy Martin like little chickens behind a hen, and he'd stop at every drill and tell us how to do everything. But when we left, we were expected to win our league and develop players, and they viewed it as one and the same, learning how to win. So I used to sit in front of the dugout before batting practice every day in Albany and Fort Lauderdale and Oneonta and all these places, Columbus, and we would talk about what won the game yesterday, what lost the game, what did they do right, what did they do wrong, what did we do right, and it might have been in the second inning something, a guy missed a cutoff or whatever that cost another run or kept the double play out of order, but you made them aware how all those things fit into the texture of a win or a loss. And players I had years later, Deion Sanders, I was talking to him, I don't know, last year about he remembers those meetings in front of the dugout where he kind of learned baseball because he'd never had that before. But it's an interesting dynamic. But I look back on my time with the Yankees, and we were expected to not only develop players, but develop winning players that knew how to execute winning situations.
I will back that up immensely. That's when I was a minor league manager. I would meet with the general manager, and he would tell me, "Hey, look, just get next year. You get 4 of these guys to the next level." And so he called me one summer and he said, "Hey, don't worry about winning, so much." I said, "Mr. Campanis, I'm going to tell you right now, when I send you a player, he's going to be a winning kind of player. He's going to know how to bunt. He's going to know how to hit and run. He's going to know how to run the bases." And I said, "That's, the other stuff, their talent will play. Well, I want to teach them how to win so that when you get them, that they're going to do the little things right." I remember Sparky Anderson told me one time when I first started managing, he said, "Don't be afraid to have a player on your bench who pays attention, and has an opinion on something." He said, "I love those guys. I love those guys to come down and say, 'Hey, are you going to pinch hit for so-and-so?'" And he said, "I love those guys." And, he was right. He was right.
Max Scherzer, I tell you, I love the guy. I loved him. Max would, not the day after he pitched or the day before he pitched, but a couple of days after he pitched, Max would come in, plop down, look around, see if somebody wasn't in my office, which wasn't very often. And he'd close the door. He'd go, "What do you got, bitch?" He'd go, let's talk. And we'd talk baseball, we'd talk politics, we'd talk, horse racing, you name it. And I love those times because I would see Max come bounding down the hall the day after he pitched with his kids about 11 or 12 o'clock. And he would go out on the field and play with them. Nobody saw that side of Max. And his wife would get the kids and they'd go back home and he turned into Mad Max. He would go work his bullpen. He would get in full uniform. I mean, everything that he was going to be doing in a game, he wanted to simulate. Max took that 5th day. Max was a baseball player who happened to be a pitcher. He wasn't a pitcher that was a baseball player because he pitched every 5th day. Max could have done anything. He was always my pinch runner, and he would look at me and he'd go put his spikes on in the 7th or 8th inning. I love the guy. And everybody said we were going to have some issues, taking him out of the game. Whatever. We never had issues. I could tell you it was great. I said, "Listen, I stick my hand out, you're done. You want to get into it? We'll go down the runway and get after it." But we talked before the game. He would talk to me with his eyes. You know what I'm talking about, Terry.
Oh yeah, sure.
I'd go down. He'd go, "I got 2 hitters. I'm getting the end. Such and such. Whatever you want to do. But I got the first 2 hitters next inning." And it was always seamless. I never had an issue. He was very cognizant of where he was and what his body was. And I love the guy. He competed and he made his teammates better. And that was another thing I loved about him. He loved baseball. He loved watching, and he loved talking how to cover first base properly. Loved it. Spring training, he was fun to have around. He'd come out there full lather, soaking wet, and the guys would look at this guy. Love the guy. You've had guys like that.
Yeah. I've been. I said it. I've talked a lot about my first year with the Mets. I was a field coordinator. I was taking care of the pitchers one day, and Johan Santana stopped the drill, and he said, "Let's do it right. Let's just do it right." And he was the same way. I mean, this guy he's a baseball player, but he had a passion for making sure it was done correctly. And,
Yeah.
that's the only way he knew how to get better. And those kind of guys are special. So, John, you got anything else for Buck?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. I would be remiss if we didn't talk about last season with the New York Mets.
Oh yes, yes, we would be. We would not be remiss.
No, I mean, it was,
I, I
last
noticed
season
you
was
got.
last season, right?
I noticed you got a jacket on. I don't know how they doing.
Oh,
Uh,
right now
I don't know.
they're
Go ahead.
one game
Go
under
ahead.
500.
No, they'll be better than that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But last year was a rough one. Everybody knows that. I mean, the sell off of the team during the trading deadline, that had to be so difficult to go through as a manager. When did you learn that the organization was going in that direction, and how did you handle that chaotic time with your players?
Well, I found out about it when Tommy Pham kind of came in and told me. I don't know which one was first. Might have been
I
David.
think Pham might have been first,
He walked in and said,
or Escobar.
"I'm not sure." That's when the player came in and told me they'd been traded. Kind of. It was. I don't know. It's something that we did it pretty early too. That was tough too because I still think that if we could have held on, because we might have been able to get Edwin back. We were without Marte and Edwin and Quintana most of the year, and it was tough. Nobody wants to hear it. We didn't talk about it at the time. Next guy up, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I'll never. I always think that you could have made the playoffs. How else would you think? That's what you were wired to do. So, but that was somebody's decision that they didn't think we were going to be able to compete for a championship that year, and they went in a different direction. So, what was I supposed to do? I just I had some conversation with guys like Max and some of the guys about they were the biggest thing with Max is Max didn't want to look to his teammates like he was jumping ship. That's what bothered him, and that's what made him want to stay. He hated the thought of jumping ship, and I hated the thought of losing him. But I had to almost not talk him into it, but give him some. I'm there to do what's best for the organization and the players. So I was trying to tell Max why, going to Texas was a good thing for him and his family. And because that's what the organization wanted. And that was tough because I know losing him and all the people that we lost out of that clubhouse, David Robertson, we lost them left and right. But it was, I was proud that we were able to hold that together the rest of the year as far as the mentality and the things that go in the locker room when you pull the plug on something like that. But it was tough, to take some of the stuff that came your way. Your job as a manager, if you look it up in those, Terry knows better than anybody, is you wear it. There's so many things that you could say that might cast you in a different light, but you wear it. It's just what you do. You wear it for whether it's whoever makes these decisions. You're a part of it. So walk in that club. I used to tell the guys who were in my office, I go, "Hey guys, I got to go walk the clubhouse." "What do you mean? You got to go? What do you got to do?" I said, "I just got to walk the clubhouse. I got to walk among the players. I got to sit down. I got to talk. I got to see how Jeff McNeil, Lindor, all these guys are doing." You just walk the clubhouse. Same thing their manager, who I really like, does today with them. And you can only go as far as, I always hold out hope that you could have, should have, would have, but, they made that decision, and I had to embrace what they had done.
Yeah, it was certainly not easy to go through, I'm sure, as a manager and the players. And it was like anytime a transition like that happens, and this was an extreme transition that took place during
Quickly.
your reign there. It had to be hard to watch.
Well,
And
it
at
may be.
the
I still don't. I'm not real sure why and whatever. I'm sure whatever was going on behind the scenes. I'm probably naive to
Yeah,
what might have been promised to somebody down the road. I don't. I don't dwell on that. I've moved on. There's good
yes,
people I've been allowed to be around, and life's too short to. He said, they said, she said. When
right.
people start talking about it, I just kind of put. I say, I want to think good things about the people that I interacted with there.
Well, you had great relationship with the players, and I could remember one situation during a press conference with Lindor, with his little girl sitting on his lap asking for Buck, where's Buck? And I mean, so that had to be just in your tenure with the Mets, being able to be that close and seeing how that relationship was with you and many of those guys in that clubhouse. And, I don't want to talk about the circumstances that led to that last game or whatever, but what was touching for the fans, had to be touching for you, was the tribute that those fans gave you that last day and those players gave you that last day. Uh, just talk about that a little bit, how much that meant to you on your last day as the Met skipper in 2023.
Well, first of all, I think Terry, that's what you miss the players. That's what you miss. You miss the interaction. You know what? That's his team now. I don't call them. I don't text them. I don't, every once in a while, I might go, nice going, whatever, real quick. But that's his team. And he's doing a good job there, from what I understand. And I love his path, like I said, and I like the way he handles himself. But that's his team. But I do miss the interaction with the players, because that there's so few places where a team can be a team nowadays. It's whether it's on the bus, it's on the plane, it's in the locker room until about 3 o'clock, when it becomes an interview room. Our football and basketball coaches laugh at baseball. The locker room, we've lost it. What have we gotten back for it? That's a question for another day. But the access and stuff, the players that's why the players' lounge is so important now. There's so few places where they can drop their guard and be themselves and interact as a team. That's why spring training is so great. You can be back on field 7, and like he said, Santana can make this statement. Max Scherzer can be himself, not going to appear on the next headline. But that's all you ask for, is the respect of your peers, the people that really go through, really know what's going on. I mean, how many people really know? I tell people all the time, how many people can deliver the eulogy at your funeral? How many? Maybe 2, maybe 3, Terry, would really like stand up and say what you're about and this and that, whatever. So the same way with baseball, those players, you interact with them every day. They know if you have a pure heart. If you're a phony, they're going to sniff through you so fast it's going to make your head spin. There's no secrets. When 7 days a week for 7, 8 months, I mean, it's a grind. And people wonder why Terry and I would get there so early at 11, 12 o'clock in the morning for a night game, because that time from like 11 to 2 was precious, because nobody interrupted. You could prepare at your own pace. You could get ready for the day, because when 2 or 3 o'clock rolls around, the doors open up the locker room, you're on. You've got to be there to serve the needs of your players, your coaches, your trainers, your medical staff. You've got to be on top of all that stuff. So, but you miss that grind. I think that's what it is. But the interaction of the players and I think they got that you had a pure heart, and through thick and thin, you never wavered. You never threw them under the bus. You never pointed the finger. You never deflected blame to somebody else. There were plenty of people around to do that. And sometimes it's more than just media. But New York doesn't have a corner on it. Every place has pressure to win. You have to deliver. The job description didn't catch me by surprise with the Yankees when I signed a 1-year contract to manage them, because I'd been there 16 years at the time. So don't complain about something that you knew was coming anyway. Nobody wants to hear it, especially fans in New York.
Well, I got segue into one last question from me. We got a few from the fans. Would you consider doing it again if the right situation was presented to you?
Well, first of all, for me to do it again, it requires somebody being fired or let go. Okay. I love all the different words they have, Terry. It's a let go, move in a different direction. I heard one today, released. They never say fired, all the different expressions that they've gone in a different direction. But I don't want to see anybody lose their job. I listen to these guys talking about jobs that someone certainly currently has. And that's one thing I've noticed. We seem like people are always working on their next job. People, when I started coaching or managing in minor leagues, I could have kept playing in the minor leagues in AAA with the Yankees, or gone to another team, or start coaching. And I looked at things realistically. I just gotten married, and I decided to take the hitting coach job in Florida State League. But these guys, they're always working on the next job. I'm not going to sit here and talk about a job that someone currently has. Would I, in the right situation? Yeah, with the right front office. Yeah, I think we all would. Terry would. But if that exists. But I hope at the end of the year, all 30 guys are back, because as Terry and I both know, it's painful. And when you put that much of your life and your soul into something, and you try not to take it personally, but I don't spend a lot of time talking about a job that someone currently has. I have a problem with that. And, some of the things that went on in places like, David Ross called me the day after he got let go. I'm like, really? Openly, I tell you, I wouldn't interview for a job if someone currently had it. I wouldn't do it.
That's right. I agree.
All right, let's get some of the fans' questions here, and we do have a few. This one comes from our X account. by user MLBLGM. What can Buck tell us about DeGrom's departure from the team? Did you get a sense that Jake was um, leaning towards leaving the Mets at the end of the 2022 season? And what was your relationship like with Jacob?
Jacob was great. Terry knows him. You talk about athletic, funny. This is a guy from very deep roots, grounded. Someone told me a long time ago, a good woman doesn't hang around or marry bad men. And like Jake's mother, his wife was great, and it's just that's why I try to get to know the families. And Jake was he didn't want to leave. He would have liked to stay there and finish it. Jake's a pleaser. He wants to bring what people want, and he didn't want to leave. But the way it was all put to him, and it wasn't like he wanted to go to some tax-free state like Texas is. It wasn't like he had already preordained this. And people think there's this like cloak and dagger behind the scenes. Jake's a simple guy that wants to pitch, and he wants to feel right when he pitches. And when it does, you see why people are willing to wait on him. It's special. Terry, you had him, didn't you?
I sure did.
Oh
But
my gosh.
I didn't, he was a different guy when I had him. I mean, he was one of the most competitive guys I've ever dealt with. I mean, I could tell you games, Buck, where he'd start out in the first inning and wouldn't have a curve, wouldn't have a slider, and yet still worked at it. And in the fifth inning, he'd look up and he'd give you 7 innings. This guy competed like crazy. So, I've always, I'm a big fan of his. So I hope he does well.
Max Scherzer told me one time, he walked down about the third time he had seen him pitch, and he goes, "That ain't right." He said, "That ain't fair." He said, "Come look at that. Are you kidding me?" And he got where he had a change up. There were nights where I would catch myself spectating, just going, "Wow, watch this." I realize how lucky I am to have the seats that we had, Terry, to see some unbelievable guys perform at that level. And every once in a while, you had to go, "Wait a minute, okay." You better, but just watching Jake DeGrom pitch and Max when they're on top of their game. And I got Max end of his career. I saw Max when he was right. And he was something. But Jake did not want to leave. Understand that he loved the Mets. He loved being there. There's always more than just one reason why things happen. Trust me.
Yeah, and the fans loved him for sure, and he was remarkable to watch. Another question, which kind of segues into pitching and elite pitching. This comes from Dylan, also on X. What was it like having 2 Hall of Fame pitchers on the same team, Buck?
Oh, you talking about Jake? You talking about Verlander?
Future Hall of Famers. You may have 3 there between Verlander, Scherzer, and Jake.
I think Jake was the one that was carrying as good a stuff as he's had. Verlander was different than he'd been in his top form, and same way with Max, but they still competed with the fastball. Schilling was probably as good a pitcher as I ever had, and Schilling used to see how long he could pitch with just his fastball. How many times if he could go around the order once with his fastball. I've seen him go 3 innings, so nothing but fastballs. And his point was the fastball was 4 pitches, up and away, up and in, down, and he would move the quadrants around. But if he got through 2 innings or maybe even 3 with all fastballs, it was over. Because now he started breaking out the slider and the get me over curveball and the split and the change. But DeGrom and Max, I've seen Max try to do that. And that's one thing that they said they couldn't do that as much anymore, pitch with 1 pitch. But, Justin was he was a pleasure to have around. Those guys kind of fed off each other. They got along good, but there was a friendly competition, and they worked very hard at their craft. They were there the day before, the day after. They had a plan. Schilling was the first guy I saw have a notebook in a dugout about what he threw last outing to this guy, or he had all those numbers, and he had them in his brain, and he didn't have to have pitch com. He didn't have to have a catcher just made suggestions to him. That's all they did was make a suggestion. He knew exactly what he was going to throw from pitch to pitch. But, Terry, having guys like that, those guys, they have a plan.
Yeah.
We got one more fan question. This is kind of to both of you, and it comes from our Gmail account. the Terry Collins Show at gmail.com. It's from a young pitcher. His name is Greg Mabel, and he says, "Hello, Mr. Collins and Mr. Showalter. I'm currently 17 years old and have been a diehard fan for many years. I specifically got into the Mets and baseball when Terry became manager. My personal pitching coach is Bob Guerra, who played minor league ball with Terry back in the early 70s in the Pirates organization. He was a pitcher. We both live in Connecticut. I got to meet Terry at spring training in 2017. The question for both of you gentlemen, which pitchers, could be starters or relievers, gave you that extra bit of confidence when putting them in a game, if you'd like to name them? And what are the differences in personality and psychology comparing pitchers and position players?"
Terry, go
Well, that's
ahead.
an in-depth. That for sure is an in-depth question. But and I've been lucky, and Buck's the same way. I mean, when I was in Houston, anytime Shane Reynolds took them on, I just said, well, how are we going to score 2 runs because we're going to win this game? Because he could dominate. When I went to Anaheim, I had Chuck Finley. Same thing in Anaheim. The days he were out there, well, you knew your chances of winning are great. I come to New York and I could run a whole bunch. I could run 5 guys at you. Jake DeGrom, Matt Harvey, Noah Syndergaard, even Bartolo Colon. There were times when I'd leave my apartment in New York, go to the ballpark, and just my thought was, I know what they're going to do. How can I get them a couple of runs to work with? And so that is a great feeling. And then to have a closer, I mean, in Anaheim, I had Troy Percival save 50 games one year, and in New York, Jeurys Familia, broke the record for saves in New York. And so those guys, whenever you put those guys in the game, you had a good feeling.
Wow. I can't top those guys. That's pretty good. We got real smart depending on who was pitching, right, Terry?
Yeah, we sure did.
I was fortunate to see Mariano at a very young age. We were down in extended spring. You want to know if you want to manage or not? Go to extended spring. Okay, that's basically where all the players that don't make a full season A club, they don't have it. Oh, they have it now. It's called a complex league. And they would send them. They didn't want to release them. So a lot of those kids were Latin. And I would start with 35 players. 27 of them didn't speak English. And you're there. So I had this kid. And Mariano, on Sundays, we used to have a workout day. And that would be, or it might have been Monday, I'm not sure, but we would let the pitchers play a game. I wouldn't tell New York about it, but Mariano was our center fielder. He was our best player. We had another guy, Oscar Zokar, who ended up playing the big leagues as a hitter.
Yeah.
I told him, hey, when you guys quit trying to make this guy a pitcher, stick him in the outfield in the Florida State League for 50 games and see what happens. We end up playing the big league. That came from that pitcher game. Mariano was our best center fielder, our best base runner, and athletically, but it's as simple as, you ever thrown a bottle top where it sails across laterally? Well, that was his cutter. He's playing catch out there. I remember Guidry and Whitey Ford, when he was on rehab, he had elbow surgery back then when it was real risky. And he was on rehab playing catch on the backfield in Lauderdale with Whitey and Guidry. They came in and go, we're not playing catch with him anymore because they couldn't catch his ball in the pocket where it wouldn't hurt their hand. His ball would move at the last second and always catch him in the palm. And that's the first time that I kind of went, wow, his ball must have a lot of late movement, a lot of late life, was Rivera. But it didn't get any more better than him. The reason why he was so good that people missed was he didn't give up home runs, he didn't walk people, and he could fill his position. So you couldn't bunt on him. He wasn't going to walk you, and he could keep the ball in the ballpark. So you had to get 3 hits off him in an inning to score a run. And that's what made him so, and he was fearless. And people, Terry, how about the guys, they would be getting ready to hit, and you'd see them change bats. Because they didn't want to break their gamer. I go, what are you doing? Mark Kakis go, listen, I got a really good bat here. I've been swinging a bat well. I'm not going to break it against Mariano. And people say, why do you break it? Why don't you just bring it in further inside? Well, you commit to where the ball is, and at the last second, it breaks down to the brand of your bat. And there's nothing you can do. They used to scream. You'd hear them scream, get off me, because they would keep coming. And it was so late. But I remember Tony Cloninger talking about his pitching coach, first time he saw him throw that cutter in the outfield. And he goes, what was that? Throw that again. And he just threw it off center, and he had these big, long fingers that he would throw through. But we've all, Terry and I have had some great relievers and starters, and we're going to leave some people out. But, the guys that would throw it over and didn't shake when their finger was on the trigger, so to speak, those are the guys that you were drawn to because the baseball balls kill you in the big leagues. And the guys that weren't afraid of the situation say, here's mine, see what you got. I'm not going to sit around here and go back to the hotel and wish I had been more aggressive and trusted myself. You want those guys that are going, here it is, let's go, bring it on. Personal.
Absolutely.
You gave up a great name. Personal said, here it is, bitch, let's go.
That's right.
Got it. I got one more. I'm sorry, and this is from a huge fan of yours, Buck. It comes from actually a friend of our producer engineer. Yes.
Got one.
This comes from Kevin, and he has a couple of just two questions here. Does being the very first manager in Diamondbacks history hold a special place in your heart? And the follow up would be both the Yankees and Diamondbacks won championship after you were let go. I always wondered if you feel like you were a part of those championship teams because you helped build them.
Well, I'll start at the end. You realize that other people can do the job as well, if not better than you. And things happen for a reason. Like, Joe Torre had a good reputation, but he didn't really, until he took over those teams in New York and took them to these great levels. I look at it, he was the perfect guy to take those guys and run them to the next level. Whether or not I could or couldn't, I'm not going to get into that. But I felt great for Joe, and because he's such, later on in his career, I became pretty close to Joe and got to know him. And then same way with Bob Brenly and the things that went on in Arizona. I got to tell you that the expansion process, I didn't want to leave the Yankees. I had, at that time, Steinbrenner wanted to fire 4 coaches, and I just couldn't let him do it. And that's really the concrete reason why I left there. Didn't want to leave. I've been there 19 years. But the Diamondbacks, if someone called me and said, hey, I want you to head up an expansion process again and run the draft and this and that, whatever, and set up the minor leagues, I'd go, no way. Almost kill me. I got to tell you, Terry, it was 7 days a week all over the world, Japan, Korea, Mexico, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, drafts, running that. And it was so much fun. We surrounded ourselves with some great scouts, great development people that were who's who, went on to have 30 careers. Mr. Colangelo and ownership let me pick the best people I knew at that time. I wish I'd known you better at that time, Terry. You'd have been in Arizona, but it was fun. It was a challenging process. The best lesson I learned was talking to the Rocky people and the Marlins. I kept picking their brain. If you had to do over again, what would you do different? They all said, don't think you can put a championship club together through the expansion draft. These people have had long enough to protect the players they want to protect. So what we did was figure out who other teams coveted in the draft. It might have been Kareem Garcia for Luis Gonzalez. It might have been some players for Tony Womack, our shortstop. So we turned over like 28 of 35 picks in the first year for established players that we wanted to go get. And we signed a Jay Bell. We traded for Matt Williams through the draft. Okay. We traded for different guys, Luis Gonzalez. We put together the cornerstones of that team through the players that we acquired. Damian Miller, we kept. Dave DeLucia, we kept. Kelly Stinnett, we kept through the draft. Those were some of the keepers. But it was tough, but it was very rewarding. And to see those teams, but it's lonely. I remember I was doing something with ESPN, and I'm walking back to my hotel after the game that the Diamondbacks won to beat the Yankees. Fans were celebrating on the street, and here I am just walking down the street by myself back to the hotel. And it was, I think it was a good lesson for me how fleeting this all can be and what really matters. And I was happy for people. Life's too short to feel anything else, to be honest with you.
Well, thank you so much, Buck. I appreciate it. And Terry, back to you.
Yeah, Buck. So I'm going to let you go. But I just, again, I think the world of you. Thank you so much for taking time and being on the show today. Great conversations. I always like talking to you because I love talking baseball anyway, but you bring a great perspective and great knowledge. And to be honest, I hope you get back in. And I agree with what you're saying. We're not talking about any particular job, but we all know there are going to be some openings, and I certainly hope you get another opportunity to get that 5th Manager of the Year award, because you deserve it.
Let me tell you, Terry won't. He's too modest and too good a guy. We used to talk now and then, not about baseball and the Mets. And Terry was one of the first guys to call me. He understands your path and what you go through. And we used to bang things off each other a little bit. I always loved to have him around because he loves baseball. He loves players. He's one of those guys. I don't like surrounding myself with people that don't like players. You don't like players, you need to go do something else. And I just appreciate your candor and always being there through the years, Terry. There's a reason why you've been so successful and people want you around. So it's a mutual love fest here. Man, it's making both of us sick to our stomachs right
now. Well, thanks again, Buck. Thanks for everything.
Y'all take care. See you later.
All right.
Thank you. As good as advertised that interview was, what a great hour with Buck.
Yeah, he's great. And when you listen to him talk, John, now you know why he's been successful as he has. You know why, the Diamondbacks came and said, hey, run the entire organization, set it all up, because he's a baseball man, and he did a great job. That's why he's won 4 Manager of the Year awards, because he goes in, his attention to detail is off the charts. And so players love it. He's got a great communicator. He's got a sharp mind. He does things that, the rest of us sometimes, he told the story about how he walked Barry Bonds with the bases loaded one time, and in the respect he got from Barry because of it. And then, so many of the other things that took place, the big year he had with the Mets. He pitched Edwin Diaz. Here's a guy who gets paid to save games, and yet used him in the 8th inning, and the guy just held it, said, hey, look, I'll do whatever I can to help the team win. And that's because of Buck's relationship with his players.
Yeah, it was really fascinating to hear, but also the mutual admiration you had for each other, the friendship there. It was just wonderful, and I think everyone's going to enjoy it once they get a chance to check it out on all the podcast platforms or watch it on YouTube. So it was wonderful to do that. Now, if you'd like Terry to answer your questions, I know we had a lot today with Buck, and Terry participated in some, but back next week, you'll be able to ask the skipper questions. Just send us an email, and that is at the terrycollinsshow@gmail.com. I want to remind everybody to follow us on our page on Facebook. So the Terry Collins Show is there. And if you want to follow Terry on social media outlets, on X, it's at Terry Collins _10. Same way on Instagram. That's the same handle. We're also on TikTok now as well. If you'd like to follow me, it's simply at John Arezzi on Instagram and on X. So Terry, we'll be back next week. We'll have a special Memorial Week show. We'll look forward to that and see what surprises you may have in store for us and what we're going to bring the fans next week, which is always a special week when it's Memorial Day.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, John. Thanks.
You got it. All right. Until next week, when we talk more baseball with you, this is John Arezzi for Terry Collins. Have a great week, everybody.